Well, thank you very much. It's a genuine pleasure to once again be with you in one of the finest NGOs in the world. I think there's no organization that has more impact and more potential than Rotary, and I thank you for allowing me to speak to you. The topic I was assigned was the topic of growing membership and living our core values. I want to change that, though, by growing membership by living our core values. I want to talk about the values of Rotary and how that can be the platform, I think, for the kind of growth that we all want to see. First of all, it's absolutely clear that Rotary International is, above all, a values-centered organization, promoting and living according to positive personal and community values is not only incidental to, but inherent in the Rotarian goals and ideals, in Rotary's explicit and implicit values as expressed in its mission, its motto, and of course the four-way test. Now I'm going to start with a few contentions and try to demonstrate them in the time I have with you. Number one is that Rotary's identity and strength is its commitment to ethical values embodied in the four-way test, its advocacy of integrity, and its tradition of service. These values should be used as the glue to keep members and as a magnet to attract new ones. Rotary's commitment to ethics as a potential antidote to the moral malaise that is generating corruption and undermining the quality of life all over the world. And I contend that Rotary could perform community service and solidify its identity as a proactive teacher, advocate, and resource of ethical behavior. And finally, I contend that the service commitment of Rotarians will be more effective if the service is more visible, community-centered, and hands-on. Just a moment on the ethical dimension of Rotary's values. And to do this, I want to talk about ethics in general and your own reaction to it. I know you're all not from the United States. We're familiar with when we grade things, we give them grades from A, B, C, D to an F, A being the best. And I wonder, and just in your own country and society, how many of you would give the ethics of your society an A? How many would give it an A? How many would give it a B? How many a C? Okay, how about lower than a C? That's not unusual. Well, then what if I ask you the ethics of politicians in your country? How many are going to give them an A? I can hardly see anything, but I know there are no hands up there. How many would give it a B? A C? Lower than a C. So no matter where we are around the world, at least a very substantial number of people do not think that the ethics of either their society as a whole or their politicians is sufficient and adequate. How about the ethics of business in your country, the economy, the business culture itself? How many would give it an A? Looking still. Okay, how many a B? Okay, a few. How many a C? A lot more. Lower than a C. So at least you grade business better than politicians. But by and large, it looks like there's some room for improvement, it would seem. So finally, I'd ask you, how would you view and grade the ethics of youth in your country? Just generally, do you think things are getting better, worse, the same? What is the ethics of youth? How many would give your youth an A? Okay, a few. B? C? Lower than a C. So there isn't a lot of optimism, about ethics. And so part of the question implicitly is, so whose problem is this, Now, we all know of major instances of ethical failures of government and business in virtually all the countries. But what about the next generation? I'm going to share with you the results of a very comprehensive survey taken in the United States, over 23,000 high school students in 2012. And I apologize, I don't have comparable statistics for other kinds of other nations, but you might at least surmise whether you think it's going to be better, worse, or about the same. But first, oh, sorry, got to go back one. Skip a few more than I thought. All right. Doesn't want to stay, does it? All right. In 2002, the survey was of 23,000 high school students from all demographics, public schools, private schools, wealthy, not so wealthy. The demographics were selected by statisticians, and the error rate is plus or minus 1%. So it's pretty accurate. Now, how'd you like it so far? I'm sorry. Wow, it's going berserk, but we will train it nevertheless. Okay. All right, so first, I am so sorry. Let's see if we can make it stay. Stay. All right. The question was, I sometimes lie and cheat to save money. 38% of the young people said they did. 33% of the females and 45% of the males. I cheated during a test at school in the past year. Now remember, these are high school students, not really young kids. Over half, 51% admitted they had cheated on an exam in the past year. I lied to a teacher about something significant in the past year, 55%. And again, notice a bit of a split between males and females, with slightly more males doing that. Sorry. How many admitted they stole something from a store in the last year? Now remember, this is the next generation of your employees. 20% of the 23,000 high school students admitted that within the past year, they stole something from a store. 17% females, 23% males. So if this was the average group of young people about this quarter here, if you're males, you're all thieves, active thieves. Stole something from a parent or relative in the past year. 18% admitted they did that. 15% female, 21% male. And by the way, it wasn't borrowed. We used the word stole. So, and finally, stole something from a friend in the past year. Well, obviously they like their friends better than their parents, but still 14% admit they stole from a parent in the last year. 10% from a friend, 10% of the females and 19% of the males. Well, you're going to get into speed reading, I guess, really good if we keep this up. Sorry. Alcohol, binge drinking. 32% of 12th graders and 14% of 9th graders had 5 or more drinks on at least one day during the past 30 days. 19% of high school boys and 7% of middle schoolers were drunk at school at least once in the past year. Now, here's an easy rule of thumb. Nothing good happens to a young person when they're drunk. They don't have good judgment when they're sober. So you can imagine the likelihood of misbehavior when they're drunk. But 26% of the students were offered, sold, or given drugs at school in the past year. 12% of high school girls said they had been forced to have sexual intercourse at least once in their lives. 12%. Whose sons are these? What are they being taught? What are they learning? And some of you have heard, at least in the United States, of the problem we're having on college campuses with young men who are sexually assaulting females and whether the schools are reacting properly. 18% of high school boys and 13% of the girls had sexual intercourse with at least 4 different partners. Well, you do the math and you realize if you have sex with everyone your partner had sex with, that's an awful lot of risk of sexually transmitted diseases. 14% of high school girls said that they were pregnant at least once in their lives. Now, some of these pregnancies ended in natural miscarriages. Some had babies and some had abortions. no matter what, it's pretty traumatic for the young girl, and this is pretty serious. So this is sort of the state of the young people, at least in the United States. Now, whether you think your country is considerably different or better, I don't know, but it says, at least here, we have a problem. Now, it's even worse than it looks, because 30% admitted they lied on at least one question. And experts say that on questions like this, if they lie, they're going to understate their misbehavior. So in other words, the figures I gave you are very conservative, because somebody who cheated on an exam might say he didn't, but somebody who didn't cheat is not going to say he did. So the fact of the matter is that the data I gave you says this is the state of the moral youth of today about to enter the workplace and/or college. And so implicitly, a question might be, is there any role for Rotary? One of my favorite quotes is from Lily Tomlin, who said, no matter how cynical I get, I just can't keep up. And you get this feeling that the bad news will never stop. There's a story about this man who wakes up in the middle of the night and he's pacing back and forth. And his wife says, what's the matter? He says, you know, we owe Charlie $5,000 and we just don't have it. And we're supposed to pay him tomorrow. I don't know what to do. And he continues to pace. And the wife just picks up the phone and dials. And it's about 2 in the morning. He says, hello, Charlie. I know it's 2 in the morning. I'm sorry to bother you, but do you know that money we owe you? We don't have it. And she hangs up. And the husband says, what did you do that for? And she says, well, now it's his problem. Come to bed. So there's one way in which this and other kinds of problems, the idea is just passing it off to someone else. There's a story, 3 birds are on a wire and 2 of them decide to fly south. How many are left? Some of you are thinking 1, but the answer is 3, because deciding to fly south and flying south are 2 entirely different things. And unless you do something, get off the wire to fly, it doesn't matter. But I want to be thin. Big deal. I want to be thin whenever I'm not hungry. The problem is when I'm hungry, I'll rationalize. So if I want a donut, I'll have a Diet Coke, and hope that it erases the donut. But the fact of the matter is that ultimately you either take a problem and deal with it or not. Look at this logo. How many of you see a big arrow in the middle of the logo? How many of you see it? I'll look closer, okay? It's hard for me to tell looking out there, but it looks like about 20%, which is about normal. Now look, do you see it now? Now, it's pretty obvious now that you see it, right? It isn't there by accident. Well, I'm going to suggest to you that's the way it is with ethics and character. Ethics and character is embedded in every single thing we do, everything we say, and yet we don't always pay attention to it because we're paying attention to the big letters, the FedEx. And so I'm going to suggest that Rotary might play a much larger role in being sure that people see that arrow and are dealing with it. How do we know what ethics is? Well, I started out with this question when I founded the Institute. We have over 8 million people involved in our program called Character Counts. If you could interview the people your children would date or marry, what are the most essential characteristics you'd look for? By the way, that went too fast. These are my children. So it makes a real difference. And when you start thinking of the ethics of society in terms of your children or your grandchildren, people you really love, you have to start thinking about, am I doing what I could do to be sure that they are safer and live a better life? Now, we developed what we call the 6 pillars of character. In fact, we work with RILA, and it's incorporated into some of the RILA programs we help them develop. But the fact is that we think ethics is trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, caring, and good citizenship. That's certainly not very far from your 4-way test. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? A commitment to ethics is in the DNA of Rotary. It is the single most defining characteristic that binds its clubs and members around the world. The Rotary motto, mission, and 4-way test are much more than statements that tell us what to do. They articulate our living heritage that tells us who we are. So, look at my first contention. Rotary's commitment to ethics is a potential antidote to the moral malaise that is generating corruption and undermining the of the quality of life around the world. Today, Rotary International and individual clubs have an unprecedented opportunity and challenge and duty to assure that all programs and activities are so visibly infused with this ethics DNA that it becomes the planet's most powerful force for honesty and integrity, compassion and service, and individual and social responsibility. Teaching, advocating, and modeling ethics must be in the DNA of every Rotary activity and a major international and local mission. I want to suggest that you promote moral literacy. Just as verbal literacy, the ability to read and write, is essential to the foundation of education and the economy, moral literacy, the ability to tell right from wrong and the character to do what's right, is the foundation of a just and caring and orderly society. So why should Rotary International and your clubs take on moral literacy as one of its issues? First, it's the right thing to do for your community. Second, it's the right thing to do for the individual whose lives will be made better. And of course, finally, it's the smart thing to do to prevent further harm from erosion of our moral ozone. What could Rotary do to improve the ethical quality of society? First of all, it could sponsor studies and white papers on ethics, on business ethics. It should be in the forefront of the thinking and surveying and perpetuation of information about ethics. It could engage qualified professionals to conduct workshops on practical and applied ethics for your communities, not just Rotary members, but any members who want to attend. And it could support character education efforts in schools and youth-serving organizations. What organization or institution is better positioned in terms of credibility, international integration, and resources to lead a moral literacy initiative? As I mentioned, RILA is an example, and of course you have Interact and Rotaract and any kind of program with kids. If it is infused with a thoroughgoing ethical program, you improve it. Well, what about the service dimension? Well, there are two dimensions to service that are important. One is the actual positive effect, and the second is personal gratification for the individuals to motivate action. Many of your most prominent activities for water and polio are amazing and having tremendous actual results, but they often do not create the personal gratification to the individuals, at least not enough to motivate action of an individual, or even to motivate somebody wanting to be a member. It's too distant. We've learned a number of things in our character development program as we're trying to build these characteristics in young people, and we have them do projects and the like. And here's some things we've learned that may or may not be relevant to you. One, giving money rarely yields a sense of gratification. Most people do it out of a sense of duty, somewhat grudgingly. They're maybe even glad to do it, but you don't have the sense of joy when you've written a check, even for a good cause. Individuals want to see how their particular actions produce positive results. Social support reinforces commitment so that other people see what you're doing, and visibility reinforces the commitment. Finally, hands-on activity strengthens a sense of gratification. Thus, I'm suggesting if you want to build membership, you want people to be attracted to the wonderful virtues of Rotary, including service, you need to think of focusing at least a substantial amount of your efforts to community service projects. You've all seen in the news the situation with the Detroit schools. Rotary clubs could just adopt a school and clean it up. Find a contractor, find a painter, find a carpenter, find whoever it is. Rotary people are people who know how to solve problems. So what if you adopted schools and literally physically improved them and invited people, that's how you get some new members, to be hands-on part of the process. The sense of gratification you have will be enormous, and the outcome, of course, is critical. Adopt a school, adopt public places, maybe it's your parks or streets. Respond to local community needs if you want people to be motivated. If you want to know how to live your life, think about what you'd like people to say about you after you die, and then live backwards. Harold Kushner once said, "Our souls are not hungry for fame, comfort, wealth, or power. Our souls are hungry for meaning, for the sense that we have figured out how to live our lives so that they matter, so that the world will be at least a little bit better and different because we passed through it. The story of the starfish, of the young boy who's throwing the starfish into the water, and the old guy says, "What are you doing? He's saving this starfish." And he says, "You can't save them all, there are too many." He says, "Well, it makes a difference to this starfish." We have to save the world one starfish at a time. The final point I want to make is that living a life that matters doesn't happen by accident. It's a matter of choice. In the end, it doesn't matter how many people you knew. What matters is how many people who loved you and cared, and how they will remember you, and for what. Living a life that matters doesn't happen by accident. It's a matter of choice. Choose to live a life that matters and to teach others to live a life that matters, and use every bit of this wonderful power and enthusiasm and passion that is so part of Rotary to make this a better world, and start at home. Thank you very much.